Really, this film became the polar opposite of everything I wanted this channel to be about. But in some ways, it's actually demonstrated and proved everything that I've been trying to teach you guys for so many years. When you start getting into these grand locations with like places supposed to have tons of jail cells and dank, dark hallways, a dude floating in a chamber hooked up with all these cables and wires, you start to get into the realm of, I'm not gonna be able to finish this thing. Almost 6 years ago, I started working on a short science fiction film called The Trinity. It was easily the most ambitious thing I had ever tried to make. The problem was I was trying to pull off too much with absolutely no budget. So I started filming it very slowly, one shot at a time, over months, and then it became years. And then something happened that I absolutely didn't plan for. A lot of my actors actually aged out of their roles. They eventually became uninterested in finishing the project, and so did I. Suddenly I was left with a lot of footage for a film I thought would probably never get finished. And it's easily one of my biggest failures for both the channel and my independent filmmaking career. Today I wanted to take a look at what exactly went wrong with The Trinity, some of the things I learned from this failure and how they can help you, how it led me to focusing on more resource-based filmmaking, and at the end of the video, I'll share with you guys some of the footage that I shot for The Trinity, and maybe you guys can help me decide whether or not it's worth maybe finishing in the future. I'm Ryan Camp, and welcome to Camp Films. Before we go any further, I want to tell you about today's video sponsor, FrameSet. A lot of times when I'm working on a film, the biggest challenge isn't figuring out the story or having the right gear. It's figuring out what I want my shots to look like and the mood and tone I want to set. That's where FrameSet comes in. It lets you pull up real scenes from real films and check out the framing, study the lighting, the mood, the camera angles, and the coverage used, so you're not just guessing on set. You have a reference and you have something to work towards. I've used it to help me plan shots, brainstorm, build better coverage, and honestly, it's helped me become a better filmmaker and cinematographer overall. If you're trying to level up your filmmaking and your cinematography, I highly recommend you check it out. So if you're interested, follow the link in the description below, check out FrameSet, and tell them that Camp Films sent you. So if you've been following this channel for any time whatsoever, you may have heard me mention a short film that I had been promising for years called The Trinity. It was easily the most in-depth, difficult thing I've ever tried to pull off. It was one of my favorite genres, sci-fi. I absolutely love sci-fi films. And I really wanted to try and do my own sci-fi film and kind of create my own universe. I wanted the viewer to get engrossed and lost in this world I created. Even though it was a short film, I wanted to imply a huge, grand scale of things and have little nuggets of lore and stuff like that hidden throughout, and just let the viewer kind of piece things together as things went along. The problem was it was just way too ambitious for a no-budget film. I wanted to have a steampunk aesthetic of sorts, almost like a David Lynch Eraserhead meets steampunk kind of vibe. I was also trying to shoot my first black and white film, which this would have been. I managed to get some really great shots at the beginning and pull off some really cool stuff with absolutely no money. I shot the majority of it in the carport of our old house, which is one of the biggest problems that I'll get to in a little bit. But the main problem was that the story called for a lot of children to be involved, and I used my own kids in these scenes, but it's taken me so long to film everything and be happy with what I've got so far that they've actually aged out of the roles and look completely different from when I first shot the scenes. Not only that, but my main character looks completely different now as well. So really the main issue here is that it took me so long to film this thing is that continuity became a huge issue. Almost every scene of this film was chock full of VFX work, and I realized really quickly that I was not up to the task of pulling off a lot of this stuff without looking for outside help. I think when you see the footage, you'll probably agree. Although I was kind of going for kind of a surreal, almost cartoonish vibe, you might get the feeling of that once you watch the footage, I was still not able to really get the lighting to look the way I wanted in a lot of the shots. The setting for the film is some sort of like dystopian, almost like a dank prison planet kind of thing, and I wanted a lot of the shots to be a lot darker than they ended up being when I actually filmed them. And just right from the get-go, my entire vision was just not really working. This film has actually caused me so much grief in my life that I actually made a poster for the film and hung it on my wall to remind myself of what not to do in the future. I guess the main reason I wanted to create this video is maybe help you avoid some of these pitfalls going forward if you try to make a film. You know that here on the channel I preach about resource-based filmmaking, solo filmmaking, making films that are within your grasp. Anytime you go out of the spectrum of what you actually have available to you and start planning things that are way beyond your means or way beyond your budget, chances are your film isn't going to get made. And this film is the prime example of that. When I first set out to make this film, I really wanted this thing to be the centerpiece of what this channel was all about. I documented every step of the process, even filming in my car with my cell phone when I had an idea for the film. I wanted everything to be there to show you guys. Really, this film became the polar opposite of everything I wanted this channel to be about. But in some ways, it's actually demonstrated and proved everything that I've been trying to teach you guys for so many years. It's actually the reason I developed my solo filmmaking method, so I could make more films without having to rely on so many other people. When you work as much as I do and you have a family, it's really hard to get out there and shoot almost every weekend. And before you know it, months have passed by and you haven't been able to film a single scene for your film. So I wanted to develop a system where I could make films in one weekend, simple films that don't require a lot of money or a lot of time. I think those kind of films are the best films for new and aspiring filmmakers to focus on early on in the career. Maybe one actor and just you behind the camera, running sound, camera, and everything else, and doing all the editing afterwards. It's really disappointing for me because I poured so much of myself into this film. I even wrote my own music for it. I really wanted this film to be my Eraserhead moment. A bleak, dystopian, sci-fi, black and white film that was very surreal and moody. I think the biggest problem with this film was the location itself. You'll see some of the behind the scenes footage here. We shot most of this on my carport at our old house, and it just worked out really great for the scenes I wanted to get as like a dank hallway in this like corporate dystopian prison palace, whatever this thing is. But I just wetted down the walls with a water hose and just used that carport as my background for a lot of the scenes, and it worked really well. But we ended up selling that house while I was making the film, and I realized that I was going to have to do a ton of reshoots, and then I no longer had access to that carport, and I didn't want to have to refilm everything. And that was one of the biggest setbacks right there, right away. You'll see in a lot of these scenes I was actually playing a character called the Siren. It was a smaller part in the film. I think I was actually able to get a lot of really beautiful shots for this film, but there was just so many things working against me here. The fact that we moved, I no longer had access to the main location I was using. My actors, it took me so long, my actors aged out of their roles. And a third major thing was one of the main characters, the father, was like this, how can I explain this? Was this old man that's basically floating in this tube with all these wires hooked up to him. And he's basically controlling all of these evil people in this hive mind inside this entire facility, presumably controlling the entire city or world, wherever we are. But I tried so many ways to pull off this shot. I tried using AI at first, when AI first came out, to like make this head floating in the water kind of thing, bobbing up and down. I tried to use actual dummy head inside of a jar of water and put bubbles in there and get that to work. Nothing I did was able to pull off the look that I was actually going for in this shot. And I just got to a point where I figured if I couldn't pull this off the way I wanted, the whole thing was just a bust. You'll notice in some of the shots that two of my children are actually playing like these prisoners inside of a cage, and they have mind powers where they can move things. I'm kind of rambling all over the place, I know. So let me set up the story and the synopsis and everything for you, and then we'll check out the footage, and maybe you guys can tell me if you think this would be something worth revisiting again in the future. So the logline for the Trinity is a young girl with mysterious powers being held captive by an authoritarian regime seeks to escape and free her people. So the story of the Trinity basically involves this world, this dystopian world that's not Earth, that's being run by this authoritarian group. We don't really know their name, but we do know that the foot soldiers are called the Sirens, and our main character, who is the evil, presumably like commander type figure, is called the Trident. They are all controlled by a character named the Father, who they think is basically a living God. So they basically worship him and do his will. And the Father has these superpowers, for lack of a better word. They think that the Father is the only living Trinity, or at least the normal people in the world do. A Trinity in this world is someone who has telekinesis, mind control, and the ability to shapeshift into other beings or forms. The Father uses his soldiers and his commander, the Trident, to hunt down anyone else who has these powers in the world and hold them captive, drain them of their life force, making himself live longer, making him stronger, and basically eradicating any opposition. Well, our story takes place when they have presumably found another Trinity, who obviously poses a huge threat to the Father and his regime. The story starts off with the Trident going to pay her respects to the Father and get her orders, and then she goes into an interrogation room where she begins to interrogate our heroine, the Trinity, who is handcuffed to a table across from the Trident in the interrogation room. But little does the Trident know that this is actually a Trinity. They think that she's just one of the other people who has some of the powers, telekinesis or the ability to use mind control. They refer to these powers as pushers, changers, and takers. And little does the Trident know that this particular Trinity, our hero, has actually been caught on purpose so she can get inside the facility where they're keeping all of the people who are like her. She can see the layout of the facility, get deep into the heart and close to the Father, and then she can make her escape, kill all those responsible, and free her brethren. So that's basically the story of the Trinity. We had this intense interrogation scene that I never got to finish or film between the Trident and the Trinity, our hero Trinity. There's going to be a little back and forth as the Trident plays her mind games. The Trinity is trying to assure her that she is in fact a Trinity. The Trident doesn't believe her, but then the Trinity uses her powers to escape her chains, gruesomely make the Trident plunge a pencil into her eyeball, killing her. And then with just a touch of the hand, our Trinity is going to take the form of the Trident, escape her cell, kill the character that I was playing, the Siren who was standing guard outdoors, make her way to the children, presumably release all the children from captivity, and then enter the Father's chamber where we assume that she ends his life and ends his rule of evil. And that's pretty much the story in a nutshell. I don't know if I should have told you guys all of that if I end up making it again one day, but I really don't think I'm ever going to get around to making it. So I just want to go ahead and get my thoughts and my story down so you guys can see it. And just, I don't know, maybe see how cool it was going to be, and yeah, that's pretty much it. What do you guys think? Do you think this is a world worth exploring anymore? Maybe I could make another story in this world, maybe simplify it a little bit more, not have the Father actually involved. I think this is a really cool premise for a world and lore. I've never really seen anything too similar to it. I really like the idea of like a steampunk sci-fi kind of thing, but man, it is really difficult to pull off when you start throwing in all these elements together and mixing them together. You got, you know, superpowers, black and white, which is difficult to pull off good, I believe anyway. You know, a location that is not of this world and not, you know, anything that we're familiar with, which is always a really big no-no when you're trying to make a no-budget film. When you start getting into these grand locations with like a place that's supposed to have tons of jail cells and dank, dark hallways dripping with water and steampunk engines moving around and gears moving and a dude floating in a chamber hooked up with all these cables and wires, you start to get into the realm of, I'm not going to be able to finish this thing. So really, I just wanted to share this story with you guys, share the footage that I actually shot, and just show you guys where I was at with it. And for many of you longtime viewers of the channel, maybe you completely forgot about me even mentioning the Trinity and I should have just left it alone. But I just wanted to show you guys what happened and, you know, just admit failure. I think that's good for us to, as creatives, to come together and just share what didn't work with other people. And I really think that's the best way for us to learn, is to learn from our mistakes and just pick up the pieces and move on to the next one. So thank you guys so much for watching the video this far. If you did, please in the comments below, leave the hashtag Trinity so that I know who my #1 viewers are. Also in the comments, if you've ever tried to make a film and it didn't work, please share your story with me in the comments below as well, so I know that I'm not alone. But you know, one thing that wasn't a failure was my newest short film, 3 AM, which is actually a sequel of a film I made a long time ago. So if you want to see something that I actually finished and worked, you can check out 3 AM right here at the end of the video. Thank you guys for coming along on this filmmaking journey with me. I am Ryan, and I will see you on the next video. Bye-bye.